Hello, welcome back. Thank you for joining me here. And thank you, as always, for taking the time out to pay attention to this message, a message from the Holy Spirit, our inner teacher. If you're brand new to this and you're wondering what I actually even just said, stick around. Welcome. No matter where you are in the world, no matter what your spiritual background is or is not, no matter what you're currently looking at or practicing in terms of your spirituality, we're all listening to the message of our inner teacher, the Holy Spirit, or we would not be here in the first place. We wouldn't be interested in this thing called spirituality, in this compendium of traditions, of which this is but one. We wouldn't even care. Yet you do. Thank you. It's very important. And I'm sure you probably realize that. But if you don't, it is. Thank you. Again, signed every living thing, whether they acknowledge that or not. Okay. So, where are we? At home in God. That's the answer. Now, here in the text, we've moved on to chapter 25, section 3. So the first two paragraphs, which are the only ones that we'll be talking about this morning, have to do with our perception, which is very important to pay attention to. The course, for our learning purposes, draws a very important distinction between perception and knowledge. Perception is the world that we see, that we appear, and I do stress appear to inhabit this wobbling, spinning ball of rock that's mostly blue with some green and brown land masses that are constantly moving, wobbling and spinning and hurtling through space so quickly we don't even notice it. And then our own lives are also hurtling through space so quickly that we can't help but notice it. And all of that stuff, all of that. Perception is inherently dualistic. So you may have heard about duality and non-duality in the spiritual arena. Here's what that is. Perception is dualistic. It involves a subject and an object, a perceiver and the thing perceived, which is always perceived outside the perceiver. There is an inherent separation between perceiver and the thing, or the mass amount of things perceived. Between subject and object, dual, two, split, separate. So, knowledge, on the other hand, is beyond perception completely. What the Course refers to as knowledge is knowledge of God. It's knowing truth, knowing who and what we all are. You're included in that, by the way. It's beyond perception completely. It's beyond all of our concepts of human being, world, wobbling, spinning ball of rock, species, Homo sapiens, sapiens, what's that? Made up collection of sounds? Yes. Right. All of that, beyond all of our concepts, including language. It's an experience. It's the experience of what is. So we're possibly going to get glimpses of this while we appear to be here, and perhaps you've had them. They're common enough, and if you haven't had them, don't worry about that. Who's to say that you won't? Maybe right now, maybe today. Knowledge is beyond perception completely. Our perception is upside down, hence all the chaos that we appear to experience, the stress, the suffering. We don't see things as they are. This course helps us to see them as they are. We don't see things as they are. Our inner teacher, the Holy Spirit, teaches us to see them as they are and guides us lovingly, certainly, to see things as they are, to clarify our perception. Why is this important? There is no knowledge, no awakening, no full enlightenment without fully 100% clarifying our perception. That must happen first. Enter A Course in Miracles. So, if you really want the peace of God and nothing else, in other words, if you really want to wake up, as we call it, you've come to the right place. A Course in Miracles, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is just one. It's but one of many spiritual traditions, and you're free to follow this or not. Honestly, this course is not better than any other tradition. It's not superior to any other tradition. In fact, in clarifying our perception, we learn that there is no separation of any kind. So a distinction, a separation drawn between something superior and something inferior is utterly meaningless, nothing, and has no meaning at all. So follow whatever you're called to follow. Yet understand there is a reason why you are here. Perhaps you've already heard the message that's intended for you. And if you haven't, stick around. And if you have, there might be more. So still stick around, right? So here's perception's fundamental law. You see what you believe is there, and you believe it's there because you want it to be there. Let's unpack this. Because we're certainly not taught this in school, nor are most of us taught this in our religious or spiritual instruction either. I certainly wasn't taught this in fundamentalist Sunday school as a kid. Not even. Can you relate? A lot of us can. Again, A Course in Miracles is a self-study curriculum, so it doesn't matter what your background is, but it's common enough. I was raised in not one but two fundamentalist Christian traditions in the United States, and by fundamentalist, I do mean what you might be thinking. Our building is the only building. That's the attitude there that I was raised with. Our building is the only building. And if it's really not the only building, in the alternative, it's superior to all other buildings because it's our building. We own the truth. You don't. Sorry. Bye. That has, of course, represented a perfect opportunity for forgiveness for me and for many of you, I'm certain. So it doesn't make any difference where you come from. The fundamental law of perception is that We see what we believe is there, and we believe it's there because we want to see it. In other words, we want to see separation, boom, you see separation. You want to see war, boom, you see war. You want to see intense disruption of all life on spinning ball of rock, boom, you see rapid fire, intense disruption of all life on spinning ball of rock. Hmm. The ego, this false sense of self, does not want to hear that. It does not want you to continue to pay attention to this message, yet the Holy Spirit invites you to. You have a choice as to which voice you're going to listen to. We all appear to be here because we've been listening to the ego. It has led us off one cliff after another, like lemmings, and we keep jumping onto the rocks below and wounding ourselves severely, getting up, walking to the next cliff, which is maybe shinier than the old cliff. It's got greener grass right along the edge and more water and a nicer bar. We're paid more to approach the next ledge or something like that. And then, oh, off we go again. So after a while, the cliff's the same cliff, no matter how shiny it may appear. And that, and we often wonder as students why it takes such brutal suffering for us to start to wake up. I mean, how many times do we have to keep doing the same thing over and over before we choose a different course of action? Something like that. Well, it's because of this fundamental law of perception. Each and every one of us appears to be here because we have this weird, wild, and impossible wish to be separate from God, which we are not, and you know that. That underlies our very presence here having this conversation. That's why we're on the spiritual path, because we've recognized that there's more to it than simply showing up, eating, breathing, sleeping, checking our email, and paying bills. I mean, go to your job, pay bills, live life, live what appears to be a normal life, but you don't have to believe in the concrete reality of said supposed real life, because it's not your real life. We're perfectly at home in God where we've always been. We're simply choosing to see otherwise, and therefore we see the world of physical bodies, wobbling, spinning ball of rock, hurtling through space so fast that we don't even notice that we're moving, and our lives move so fast that we can't help but notice that they're frantic, chaotic, and we're dazed and confused. Where do you turn for help? Within your inner teacher, the Holy Spirit. That's who. So, this law of perception that we see what we want to see, we believe it's there because we want to see it, implies something very, very powerful. Our mind is more powerful than we give it credit for. Mm, yes. This law of perception is a highly convoluted adaptation of God's law, which is very simple. Love creates itself and only itself, nothing but itself. So, in truth, love creates itself, but only itself, nothing but itself and only itself. God extends himself and only himself. Do that verbal math, will you? You've done it before. Do it again. Each and every one of us is the Son of God. This term does not refer exclusively to Jesus. He doesn't want to keep that to himself. He dictated this course, after all. The Son of God is the extension of God. It's all encompassing and all inclusive. You are included. Your worst political enemy is included as well. Yeah. Your ex is included. Your former boss, whom you couldn't wait to leave behind, is included. Each and every one of us is included. Love creates itself and only itself. God extends himself and only himself. There is no separation of any kind. You are the Son of God. God's the creator. We're the Son of God, the extension of God. You know this. Sit with that as much as you feel able to do that today. Because the wobbling, spinning ball of rock is going to throw something up in your experience to disturb this certainty and peace. You may count on that. That's why to take time out to entertain the message of the Holy Spirit is of great value. We all need these little breaks and interludes because our email inbox is waiting for us. A stack of bills is waiting for us. And should you choose to wallow into it, our news feed on social media is waiting for us, with everybody posting exactly what they want to post because they can, and they've been given a platform to do it. That platform that is used to spread fear, guilt, blame, hatred, rage, misinformation, and lies can also be used to broadcast the message of the Holy Spirit, which is what you're watching. So, again, thank you. Signed, every living thing, whether they acknowledge you're doing it or not. It's not the point, which you know full well. You're here. So, here's the deal. God did not create the world, despite what your Sunday school has told you. God's laws don't obtain in a world where everybody thinks they're separate. He didn't create that. In other words, God did not enter the insanity with us. And this world is insanity. It is insane to believe that we're all separate beings. It's not healthy, is it? So perhaps you've run into a question that is common enough that pops up in our minds as spiritual students of any tradition, not just A Course in Miracles, but all of them. You may have asked yourself this along the way. If God is perfect love, why did he create all of this suffering? Why did he make inequality, injustice, power imbalances? Why? Why do some people appear to have poor health while others appear radiant and vibrant? Why? Why all of these inequities? Why? Well, God didn't make the world. He did not create this. He did not, does not, and cannot enter the insanity. However, he's not going to enter this insanity, but he sends his sanity with us. This is the Holy Spirit, known by many names, even here in A Course in Miracles. So if you want to call it something else, if the title Holy Spirit makes you nervous because of your own upbringing, who cares? Not a problem. That's all right. Call it whatever you wish to call it. That is not important. What is important is your relationship with it, or them. If you want to call them your guides or your high council, go forth. It's all right. The Holy Spirit is part of our mind. We're invited to follow this part of our mind, to ask it for guidance and to follow its guidance. This is a message that goes out to all of us all the time. So, in doing this, in appealing to the Holy Spirit, you're not appealing to anything that's outside you. There's nothing outside you. There's no separation of any kind, ever. So, God sends His sanity, the Holy Spirit, with us. The Holy Spirit and God are one, as well, we're one, too. Yet here on Wobbling Spinning Ball of Rock, we don't realize it. So this sanity goes with us and may have lain dormant in your mind for a long, long time. And you look at a lot of people and what they're doing in the world right now, and it's readily apparent that they're not listening to the guidance of their inner teacher yet. So be it. You are, and that's what matters. So while God doesn't enter this insanity, because he sends his sanity with us, i.e., the Holy Spirit, his presence is reflected everywhere. Not everything we see and hear and experience in the world is disturbing, after all. There are many wonderful, beautiful things here, even though there is no world. Fundamental, basic teaching of A Course in Miracles, the main teaching, actually. We're perfectly at home in God. Spirituality, that's why they call it spirituality and not world studies, world fixation. No, we've been trying that, thinking we're separate, and that this wobbling, spinning ball of rock is our real home, knowing the full well the entire time that it's not. So embrace that. Allow these ideas to permeate in your mind, percolate, stew, and fester. Lighten your mind. Do that as much as you are able. We think this is real, so we need God's sanity to speak to us. We think we're separate. We need to be shown that we're not. How do we bring this about? Well, we choose the guidance of our inner teacher instead of the ego. Simply that. Something very powerful that we can all do is to approach any situation that you may encounter in life, asking, how can I shed the light in this situation? How can I shine the light of truth? into this situation? How can I best shine the light? Ask your inner teacher. It's a very general question. Ask that general question, and the specifics show up. So let's go back to this basic law of perception because we're correcting our perception. Pretty much we see what we want to see. We believe what appears to present itself to us because we want to see it. You may protest that you don't want to see suffering. Okay, good. You don't want to see all of the psychodrama that consumes wobbling, spinning ball of rock at all times, not just today, but at all times. No problem. What would happen? And it's a question well worth asking. What would happen if instead of seeing warfare and political violence and all of this stuff, what would happen if you wanted to see peace instead? What if you wanted the peace of God instead and wanted it so deeply, so totally and strongly that you wanted nothing else? What if you wanted to see that and nothing else? What would you then see and nothing else? Yes, clarify your perception. When we clarify our perception, truth dawns of itself. In other words, when we're ready to awaken, God takes the final step himself. Truth dawns of itself, and then boom, we're awake. But first, we must clarify our perception. So, most of us have what appears to be, no sugarcoating it, a long, long road. We appear to have a process. Yet when we appeal to the sanity of God, that God is sending with us, the Holy Spirit, it's possible to make great progress. Each and every act of forgiveness, no matter how small it may seem at the time, is in fact huge, putting it mildly. It affects the one mind to an order of magnitude. What if we all got together and wanted to see the peace of God and nothing else and forgave the world totally, as we're invited to do and taught to do here in this course? What then? This is where a lot of people stop at where they should keep going. A lot of people stop at, okay, I want to change and rearrange the world. I want to remake the world, bring about a new world. What world? There is no world. I mean, if you're wondering why more people aren't doing the course, there you go. Who's ready to hear that even? Well, you are. You've heard it several times in the last 20 minutes or so. You'll hear it again. I mean, really, who's ready to hear that? And if you're ready to hear it, who's ready to really think about that and contemplate it? Okay. Weeds more out, doesn't it? Who's ready to entertain this in their mind? And who's ready to appeal to the guidance, the calm, loving, certain guidance of the Holy Spirit, to put these ideas into practice and to allow our experience putting these ideas into practice to prove to us to demonstrate to us that these ideas are true. Ready? Good. Join me. And thank you again for paying attention to the message of the Holy Spirit. So, if this is something that's new to you, well, this is what A Course in Miracles is all about. And if this is something that you've been doing for 30 years, again, this is what A Course in Miracles is all about. As experienced students of the course, it's very important, isn't it, to pay attention to what seem to be the fundamentals, to what seem to be the basics, as often as we're presented with them. Because you never know. Today might be the day where this light bulb, this proverbial light, goes on and you get it. And many of you have had these experiences along the way. Probably all of you, really, at one time or another. I mean, you're here, which says a lot. So this course doesn't mess around. It's not about making the world more peaceful. It's not about making the world better or more prosperous or shinier or full of love, light, rainbows, unicorns, beside a babbling brook with a tasty bottle of wine and lots of cash. It's not about that. There is no world, which I know you know. We all do. We all deep down recognize that we're perfectly at home in God. We've never left. All of this is a wild, spinning dream. That's why they call enlightenment awakening. It's a very appropriate term. So, how do we awaken? Well, you're on your way right now. One act of forgiveness at a time, one moment of connection with the Holy Spirit at a time, one moment of choosing to see things with the Holy Spirit instead of the ego. One such moment at a time. Then we have the present moment to do it again and again and again. Yeah, and just like that until it becomes habitual. When it does, you'll begin to notice that you no longer see things the same way. Mm, exactly. All right. So thank you for tuning in. Here's the prompt over here in the corner of your screen to subscribe. If you have not yet, please go ahead and do that. Thank you to those of you who have recently joined us. There are several recordings each week. There's always something to talk about, after all, even if it's the same thing over and over. Enter any spiritual tradition on that one. They all say the same things over and over. It's the repetition that we need. So something has been said. You're watching still near the end. So there has been at least one message from the Holy Spirit for you. You'll know what that is. Go forth, ask his guidance, and follow it. That's an important part. Along the way, should you have any questions, please feel welcome to leave them here. I've intended this space to be a safe space to ask any questions that you may have about A Course in Miracles or about spirituality in general. Yeah, there's no such thing as a question that's too basic. Those are often the best to ask because you never know. Somebody that's been doing this for 30 years may have that proverbial light go on. Just saying. So please ask questions if you have them, and I will speak to all of you very soon. Thank you again for tuning in.